All right, let's chat now to attorney Anthony Norton, who was consulting our sister station ETV with its case. Good evening and thank you very much for your time. Could you please explain why ETV and Telkom went ahead applying for this interdict, which you have now been granted, particularly with the concern is that it's going to further delay the rollout of everything to do with 5G, lowering data costs, etc., etc.?
Sure. Let me try and explain it from an ETV perspective very simply. Anyone who watches ETV, most of the people who watch ETV get it via terrestrial broadcasting, which means that you need a particular type of signal via a type of spectrum, which is called an analog spectrum, in order to receive the television signal. What ICASA is proposing is that that spectrum that ETV uses to broadcast its signal will be sold pursuant to the spectrum auction, and then that spectrum will be sold to a variety of telecoms operators, whoever wins that particular auction. Now, originally what was proposed was a process of what was called digital migration, and basically what that meant was that television signals would be moved from an analog spectrum to a digital spectrum, and that households would then still be able to receive the television signal. But ICASA has now proposed in a sudden about turn that they will instantly auction the analog spectrum which ETV currently uses, and that will instantly, post the auction, go to whoever wins that particular auction. Now, what that will mean is that ETV will no longer be able to broadcast its television signal in the same way as it currently does today. And what ICASA has proposed is that ETV will have to share its spectrum with whichever telecoms company wins the spectrum auction. Now, that raises serious practical problems because of signal interference, etc., which will fundamentally mean that ETV won't be able to broadcast its television as it currently does. And I think that's really the principal problem and issue here from an ETV perspective, because ETV was never consulted about this. And that this has been sprung upon ETV at the last minute by the ICASA in order to try and salvage their spectrum auction.
So am I correct in the sense that ETV and Telkom are saying that ICASA is kind of putting the cart before the horse in a way? The digital migration should be finished first before they look at everything else?
Absolutely. And I think that was what was always originally proposed. ICASA had always said, look, digital migration will take place first. There will be an orderly process where the television stations will be migrated from analog to digital, and that will be an orderly process over a period of time. And also set-top boxes will be rolled out to the public so that they will be able to receive a digital signal when the migration happens. But as we all know, the set-top box rollout process has totally stalled, and the average consumer out there is not able to access set-top boxes. And as a consequence of that, the digital migration process has also stalled. But notwithstanding the fact that the process has come to a total halt, which ICASA really acknowledges, they're saying, well, notwithstanding all of that, now, tomorrow when the auction process takes place, we're going to take away your spectrum, and you're going to have to share that with whoever wins the spectrum auction.
What is it?
Which is practically just not feasible.
No, I hear you. What does it mean, though, for the consumer? And I've just been given a lot of information, and I'm going to read verbatim. I'm sorry, I'm not sure which organisation it's from, but it says Monday's judgment is likely to delay the rollout of commercial 5G networks in South Africa. It's a victory for Telkom, but a significant blow to Vodacom and MTN. Surely then also a blow for cell phone users?
Well, I think the process is much more complex than that. And the reason for that is both Vodacom and MTN have reached other spectrum sharing arrangements with other players in the industry. So they already have access to additional spectrum as we sit here today. So I don't think it's necessarily the catastrophe that some people may think it is. And I think, the bottom line is that the process has to happen in an orderly fashion, which takes account of all the players' rights in the industry and means that there's a sensible migration process. Because if there isn't, the average consumer out there who watches the SABC or ETV may find that they're not able to get their signal, and they won't have any access to either the SABC or ETV as they would in the ordinary course. And that has, as significant implications for the man in the street as does, access for, to potential cell phone access.
Very quickly, I know the matter now, the interdict has been granted, now it goes to court. How long do you expect this process to take before we have clarity on either digital migration or the auctioning of the spectrum, which of course the President himself said he wanted to happen quickly?
Sure, that's a very good question, and I think, to be honest with you, that is uncertain. There is an urgent review process which is currently underway, and I think, the timing of when there will be final resolution on this issue depends on the completion of that process, but that is a little uncertain at this point.
Well, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. That is Attorney Anthony Norton, and Anthony Norton is consulting our sister station, ETV. And, of course, ETV and Telkom winning that interdict against ICASA to postpone the spectrum auction.